characters in theology were heavily invested in the Summa Theologiae of St. Thomas Aquinas, and that was, like the name Dominic, another 13th century gift. My monastic superiors emphasized Aquinas to teach us what to think, but I also absorbed his writings greedily for how to think. If Aquinas spent the morning reading pagan Aristotle and the afternoon writing Christian theology, and never found a conflict between reason and revelation spoiling his lunch or disturbing his siesta, there must be no conflict between reason and revelation or any other such disjunctive pairs. That, at least, was my conclusion forever after. As it happened, my departure from both monastery and priesthood had nothing to do with history and the Bible, but everything to do with theology and the Pope. In the fall of 1968, I said on PBS that the encyclical Humanae Vitae was wrong about birth control. That led to an immediate rebuke from the Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago. When the dust finally settled, about 6 months later, Cardinal Cody was still the Archbishop, but Father Dominic was both an ex-monk and an ex-priest. When I moved from seminary to university in the fall of 1969, my research focus was already established on the historical Jesus, that is, on the living, breathing, first-century Jew proclaimed as Messiah, Christ, and Son of God by some of his contemporaries, but crucified as rebel and alleged King of the Jews by official Roman power. That focus had actually started far back in September 1960, when my religious superiors sent me to be chaplain for a group of Americans on a Roman Catholic pilgrimage across Europe. We visited Castel Gandolfo for John the 23rd, Fatima and Lourdes for Mary, Lisieux for Thérèse, and Monaco for Grace, honestly. And since it was 1960, we spent a day at Oberammergau's Passion Play, performed every 10 years in the foothills of the Bavarian Alps. In 1634, and every decade thereafter, the villagers have fulfilled their promise of a full-day Passion Play in thanksgiving for deliverance from plague. Something happened for me that day when I first saw as drama a story I knew full well as text. The play made me confront new questions. How had the same crowd that filled the huge stage that morning to welcome Jesus on Palm Sunday become changed by afternoon to cry for his crucifixion on Good Friday? It was for me a quiet but clear epiphany that something was missing from that story of Jesus' passion. Something was wrong when acclamation became condemnation without any explanation. The play I saw in 1960 was the same version that Adolf Hitler saw in 1930 and 1934, the tercentenary year. That is, both before and after he became Chancellor of Germany. His review? Never has the menace of Jewry been so convincingly portrayed as in this presentation of what happened in the times of the Romans. There one sees in Pontius Pilate a Roman, racially and intellectually so superior that he stands out like a firm, clean rock in the middle of the whole muck and mire of Jewry. My interest in and focus on the historical Jesus started that day in Oberammergau. But its memory meant that for me, history would have to be laced with theology, and that I could never reconstruct the historical Jesus as dispassionately as I might, say, the historical Alexander. Only good, honest, and accurate history might save Christian faith from a theological anti-Judaism as the continuing seedbed for racial anti-Semitism. That was why, after my return to Chicago in 1961, I joined Rabbi Shalman on a Sunday morning TV program called, from memory, Deicide or Genocide. It was also why my very first scholarly article was called Anti-Semitism and the New Testament, Theological Studies, 1965. Starting with my 1973 book, In Parables, The Challenge of the Historical Jesus, and for the next 20 years at DePaul University in Chicago, that subtitle was the heart of my scholarly research and professional life. During those years, my emphasis was always on history rather than theology, and questions of personal faith were bracketed as irrelevant for academic discourse. I myself, however,